Hello, listeners. Welcome to the latest Arcade Attack podcast. I've got another amazing guest today, the Lemmings, the GTA legend himself, Michael Dailly. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike.
No worries.
Brilliant. Can I start actually when kind of your earliest memories and fondest memories of video games growing up? What were your favourite games back then?
Let me see. Initially, I think the first stuff I saw was an arcade machine, Galaxians or something. But after that, a friend got a ZX81. We used to play some crappy games on there. But it was really when he got a Spectrum and we started playing things like Manic Miner and Full Throttle and all that kind of stuff, Death Chase, was when you kind of started getting hooked on it. They were the ones that really, Speccy games, the variety of them was great. And that's what kind of hooked us.
Brilliant. How did you first get the opportunity to get into the gaming industry? What did you do it at college or at university, or what was the big opportunity?
No. So back in about 85, I had a Commodore Plus 4, and a friend from school told me to go and along to this computer club that he'd heard about on the Kingsway in one of the colleges here. And so I took along, you had to take along everything basically. So I took along my Commodore Plus 4 and my portable monitor in this huge hold all. Took it on a bus, went away around there. It was a fair distance away. And then met up with Steve Hammond, Russell Kay, Dave Jones. They were at this club as well. Most of the club was basically copying games as you did back then. But these guys were kind of like myself, were a lot more interested in making things. I took along a couple of demos. I think I had a kind of scrolly, dreadnoughty type spaceship or something at one of them. And that kind of drew interest. So Steve was on the 64 at that point. Dave had just got his Amiga, but he was still doing Spectrum stuff with Russell. So we all kind of got together and basically started to make little demos and things together. Russell and Dave finishing off a game called Moonshadow on the Spectrum. Dave actually grew bored of that and went onto his Amiga and left Russell to finish it off. But, we did lots of little game with no names, as we called them, which were just games we started up and never went anywhere. And then Dave started to get into his Amiga programming a lot more while he was at uni. And basically that's what Menace came out of. I'd been, I think I was just finishing school at that point. I was going away to college. So once he finished Menace, he started doing another game called Blood Money on the Amiga. And Menace did okay. I think it sold about 20,000 copies, enough to buy him a little car. And he decided that he quite fancied doing, starting up an office. I'd just been kicked out of college around Christmas time for not going, basically. The courses back then were all kind of sysadmin things. They weren't particularly useful. So no great shakes. But my mother obviously wasn't particularly happy. But I think 3 months after that, Dave asked if he started an office, would I want a job? So, that was a pretty easy interview and a pretty easy answer, get into your kind of dream job doing games. So he got me a Dolphin DOS for my Commodore 64, which was a kind of turbo loading thing, the disk drive. And I did this shoot 'em up demo, and he gave that to Psygnosis as proof that I could code. And he got, for my first game, Ballistics, he got that as a port from the Amiga and ST, and I had to take that onto the Commodore 64. So we kind of started probably about May or so in Russell Kay's house. We were up in his bedroom doing these ports. He was doing Menace at that point. I ported Menace to the PC, and I was porting Ballistics over to the Commodore 64. And we were there for about 3 months until Dave got an office sorted out, and we all moved out of the office. So it was an interesting start, but it was fairly straightforward as far as I was concerned. You don't get interviews quite that easy. Do you want a job? Yes. Thank
No.
you. Yeah.
I mean, you obviously earned your job, but I suppose you knew the people as well. Were these? Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael. These were the original. You and yourself included the founders of DMA Design. Is that right?
Yeah, the four of us were kind of the ones that started out back in '85 or so. We were all making games together, and then when Dave started up, I mean, it was his money. He started the office, and then I was the first employee. Russell and Steve were freelance for a while, and then came into the company later.
Brilliant. What does DMA stand for, if you don't mind me asking?
Doesn't mean anything.
Right, fair enough. That's a very good answer. What was it like the early days? Because he said earlier, just saying you worked in bedrooms. Obviously, it got, I assume, a bit more professional when you moved to an office. How do you reflect on sort of really early days and sort of finding your feet and building a name for yourself?
I mean, it didn't actually change that much when we went to the office, because it was still just the four of us initially. It was still very much a boys' club. So much so that when Dave's girlfriend came down to the office, she would go into a cleaning frenzy because the state of the bathroom in the office was horrendous. And because we were, teenagers and early 20-somethings, we didn't even think of that. So in the early days, it was very chilled, and it still didn't feel totally real when you get down to it. I don't think it did until I saw my first game on a shelf in a shop. That was pretty cool. It took a good few years till other folks started coming into the office before it started getting a little bit more, we're a proper development studio now. So Gary Timmins appeared a month after me. They've employed him to do art. And we had other folks. Scott Johnson came as well. He was to do art for Walker. Who else came in the early days? We had lots of devs float in and out as well. We kind of became a hub because there wasn't many places in Scotland for coders. So I think there was one in Glasgow as well, and they'd come through now and again, just for chats and drinks and stuff. So early days was still very bedroom codery.
Nah, fair enough. You've even for a good number of years, DMA Design, they work very closely with Psygnosis. How did that opportunity and that relationship sort of arrive? And it just seemed that you guys seem to work very well together. Would you agree with that? And how would you sort of reflect back on that sort of relationship?
In the early days, I think that's true. I mean, it was obviously Dave with his Menace game that chose Psygnosis. He initially took the demo around various places, and I think Houston were the first ones to actually show interest. And actually, it was published on the front of a magazine under the Houston name because it was going to be Synapse. Mm-hmm. But doing a port of the game, you obviously don't get nearly as much money. So Dave decided to keep looking. And I think he said that Psygnosis was more or less the closest one. You could drive down, and they were interested. So I think it was about a 3.5 to 4 hour drive from Dundee to Liverpool. Well, in those days. It's a bit longer now because the speed cameras that he used to floor it. I think we did it in 3.5 hours from Dundee, which was quite good going in those days.
Yeah.
So it was really, I mean, Psygnosis was just getting going, but they were the closest ones to us, really, and you could drive there.
Good stuff. I spoke to Mike Clark recently, and he worked for Psygnosis, and he said that sometimes he would help out your games and just test them. Did you ever do any work on any of their games by any chance? Ever cross over at all, or you kept your own stuff really?
Well, I did a couple of ports. I mean, we did a few ports at DMA. I did Ballistics and Shadow of the Beast.
Yeah.
We did a C64 port, Shadow of the Beast as well. I think after that, it was just all our own stuff because the Lemmings had appeared by then. But up until that point, it was those two games we ported to PC Engine and C64.
It must have been pretty hard to get Shadow of the Beast on the C64. How do you reflect on that sort of particular that role?
I didn't do that port. I did the PC Engine one.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah,
I helped roughly on the 64 one just to give technical suggestions on how to do things. But it was actually done by Richard Swinfin, who was a friend of mine at the time. The 64 one was interesting because it started out as disc and then went to cartridge, just because of the size of it.
Yeah.
But the 64 is kind of suited to smooth scrolling, so it was okay. There was just the usual challenges of fitting a game that size in, but wasn't too bad. The PC Engine port was more complicated. We started out doing just a straight port of it, but then the contract with NEC, they weren't particularly happy with that. They wanted a lot more added to it. Like Psygnosis had been promising them the earth to get them to sign up. So it ended up going from just a cartridge to the CD-ROM system, and the CD-ROM stuff was a nightmare. You didn't have directories or anything when you built the disk system. You had this huge double bay SCSI drive. That was a 720 meg drive, which back then when you had like a 20 meg drive, that was what your machine had. These were huge things. And it basically built this direct index accessing thing. So it was a bit of a pain to build and get running. And we ended up doing a big full motion video player for it as well to actually get the intro sequences as you go from one level to another. You got this bit of video playing as well. So it was complicated, and it actually took a couple of years to do, which when you're used to doing games in 6 months was a long time.
Yeah, especially if it's a port as well. That's quite a long time, isn't it?
Very long time. It became known as the game from hell. Just would not die.
Yeah. Are you a fan of the original? Because obviously the Amiga version is a top of the range, isn't it? It's visually stunning.
I remember when we first saw it, and it was, it's basically a tech demo turned into a game, but the playability on it was awful.
Yes.
But the visuals on it were very pretty. The first time Ian Etherington brought it up to show us, it was, you kind of jaws hit the ground a little bit. It looked like an arcade machine, which was very cool.
I actually agree. It looks amazing. It doesn't play quite as good as it looks, truthfully.
Yeah.
I've got to ask now, Lemmings. You are probably best known for 2 gaming series, and we'll talk about the second one soon. But Lemmings, wow. How did that first start? How did you first sort of think we're going to make a puzzle game, and we can make it with like small sprites? I would love to know kind of early development ideas thrown about and how you sort of stumbled across this amazing game.
So the initial part of it was the characters, obviously. And that came about because of an argument between Scott Johnson and myself. Scott had been brought in, as I said earlier, to do graphics for Walker. Walker was the character out of Blood Money, the 2-legged AT-AT that Dave really liked and wanted to do a game with. So Scott came in to do graphics for that. He did the initial AT-AT sprite, and then set about doing characters for the Walker to shoot. But they were all about 16 by 16 pixels high, so they were large, and I thought overly large. You think of Star Wars and its AT-AT, people barely come past the feet, really.
Yes.
Whereas on the Amiga, that would bring them up almost to the height of the cockpit, so it would make the AT-AT seem very small. So I had this discussion with him saying that this should be much smaller. 8x8 would probably be good. He didn't think you could get any kind of character in that. So I set about doing this animation to try and prove him wrong. I think the animation's out there somewhere. You can see from it that I did it mostly. I think it ended up being about 10 pixels with his bouncy hair, or spiky hair as I drew him. But it was a lot slimmer and smaller, and kind of fitted the bill much better. But when I was doing it, and I took inspiration for the character from a couple of games. One was Beachhead 2 on the 64. They had a really nice animation sequence of a guy throwing things. And I remembered it a lot smaller than it actually was, But then the other one was Oids that had, tiny 4 or 5 pixel high characters who didn't animate well, but, as soon as you make them a little bit bigger, you think, well, that should probably work better. So after seeing that and drawing some of these Lemmings, I decided to kind of draw a gun, shooting one and having it burn down the way that Oids did when you shot them on the ground. And did I do that? And then I think I did that one first. I had the gun and the little burning down animation, and I showed that to the guys, and they were all just kind of falling about laughing at it. Just this stack of wee men running up to a gun to be shot. It was there that Russell kind of just coined that phrase. They just look like lemmings walking up and falling off that. And that kind of stuck. And just say, there's definitely a game in that somewhere. After that, I drew a 10-ton weight squashing them. Then Gary Timmons did a couple of other death sequences. He did a mouth and a spinny blade. But he also took my original character and smoothed it out and made it a lot more bouncy. So once they had that, it was really just who could find the time to do the demo first. Russell managed to get them walking on the ground first. He had an idea from watching Salamander, when you fire missiles and they come along and they hit the ground and they follow the terrain. He had this idea about using that for lemming walking. So he did a demo with all the Lemmings characters dropping on, walking on the ground, using this technique. And he got the 100 on an 8 megahertz PC, which was a lot of characters back then. So that was the first demo, and that was shown to a few folk. We actually went down to the PCW game in, when would it be, September or October of '89. So the office had only been open a couple of months, and we all kind of flew down to London to go to this computer show. And they showed it around, and everybody's going, yeah, nothing, no huge amounts of interest in it as yet. And so I think that I managed to do a very brief demo of just 11 walking as well on the 64, but then I got pulled onto something else. I think I was ready to start Shadow of the Beast at that point. And then it was actually Dave that then found the time. He was working on Walker, but it wasn't going the way he wanted. So he shelved it and decided to have a go at Lemmings instead. And it's actually Dave and Gary that came up with the skills and general gameplay of it all, and the mechanics of just digging through the ground and all that kind of stuff. He did it in a very simple way, just a huge bitmap, and had all the characters walking over just like Russell's demo, and then just came up with ways of letting them modify the ground, which is obviously putting something down, taking something away, and then giving that as tools over to us to actually try and make levels with. The traps themselves came from the very original demo. When I did the animation, we did all these ways of killing lemmings. It was obvious that when you did a game, the whole thing would have to revolve around them dying in some way. So the traps were really an obvious thing to put in to say, we can get all these comic deaths. It was very much Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner style, just more ludicrous you can think of, the better. Which is where the 10-ton weight came from. It was brilliant. Wile E. Coyote stuff. So he put in all these objects and got Gary to animate them all. Scott drew all the backgrounds, and then he gave us this wonderful level editor to basically play and see what kind of levels we could come up with. And from that, it was really we just sat and made levels and tried to beat each other with these levels. So it took a wee while, but bit of practice, and we were ending up making incredibly difficult levels that everybody else could solve almost instantly because we were so good at the game by that point.
Yeah.
But it was, you can't obviously release games with impossibly difficult levels to start with. So it did occur that if you just added a couple of skills or something to the levels we already had, you would make them a lot easier. So that's why you've got the duplicate levels through the game, just to save us making, huge numbers of them. You just take the original level, that was hard. We added a couple of skills, make it much easier, and then Gary went through and graded the whole thing basically to make that nice difficulty curve. And Gary did the basically those introductory levels, just dig and so on, just to get people into it. And they're really important because it introduces everybody to each individual skill, so you can see what it does without any complication in it. And then you start getting all the combos and stuff, and really eases you into the whole game. It's probably one of the first tutorials that you kind of got in computer games. It's just this slow introduction of things. So I mean, it was quite a slow build from that initial thing all the way through. I mean, that would have been 89, and then the game obviously came out in 91. So it took about 9 months, I think, to actually do the game. So there was a good 6 or 7 months where, somebody would do something, it would stop, and go on to something else, and then come back until Dave actually sat down and started making it in all earnestly, basically. So.
It's a great game, and it was a bit different for me at the time. It stood out. I think the small sprites stood out. I mean, did you know from, not day one possibly, but quite early on in development, that it was pretty special? This game could be really quite important in the industry.
No, you never do. No matter what game you're doing, you're so isolated in your own little view of it that you've no idea how other people will take it. I mean, we've done other games before that just didn't do anything that we thought were great. I mean, it's the same in any industry. People making movies and stuff will think their movie's the best thing, won't go anywhere. People making games, I mean, you see all these games go out there, and they just won't go anywhere. I think Dave says when he took the first few demos of the level down to Psygnosis to show them, and he left the demo desk and went out for lunch with Ian. Then when he came back, it was on every single machine in the office. And he says that's when he realized that it could be something special.
Yeah.
Us in the office, it wasn't really until we started seeing magazine reviews and people talking about it that we actually really got a good idea of, what it was going to do.
It's a good answer. I've got to ask, actually, out of you mentioned earlier about the saying, the Lemmings famously throw themselves off cliffs.
Yeah.
It's a perfect character. Did you even for a split second, or any of your team, think about other characters, other animals, or make them humans, or was it always Lemmings from day one?
As soon as Russell said that they're like Lemmings, the first time I showed them it, that name just stuck because it just fits it perfectly. No one ever thought about changing the name, as far as I'm aware. Certainly not in Dundee. I don't know if Psygnosis did, but to us it just fit perfectly. These guys just walk along and then fall off the end of a cliff. It was perfect.
It was perfect. I've got to ask a random question. Have you ever seen a real lemming in real life, an actual lemming?
Stuffed one at a museum.
Oh, bless. We don't want to know how that lemming died, sadly. We never know, I don't think. But do you have a favourite kind of, it's a bit of a morbid question, but a favourite lemming death, a kind of funny death scene?
Everybody's got to go with the explosion, surely.
Oh, man. I have to say, it sounds terrible, but sometimes if I knew I wasn't going to win the level, I would just press the detonate button.
Yeah.
And just watching the amount of sprites, it was sadly or quite morbidly quite satisfying, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's strange because it fulfilled two needs basically. One is you had to quit the level and start again, and the other one was just this release of frustration. It just fulfilled it perfectly, and I mean, it just came about because Dave loved the Defender explosion when you shot something about these big explosions, and he just loved that. So it was Scott Johnson did a particle system in BASIC to generate this animation, and then it's just this little point cloud sprite that gets drawn. So, but it works great. It's just that release of frustrations is brilliant.
How about the pause menu, the option? I quite thought that's quite clever. Who came up with that idea?
I'm not sure, but I have to say for us, it seems quite natural. I've got a feeling it's been on other things before Lemmings.
Oh, fair enough.
But I'm not quite sure where from. But it was quite natural for us, I think.
It's just a great example, another example of that game just being the humour of the game was perfect, I have to say. Was there a particular level that you helped design that you think, wow, this is a brilliant level, it's got everything I want in it, and you look back and go, that's probably the best Lemmings level I've made? It could be for any Lemmings game.
The original one, it's Hero Time, is definitely my favourite. Normally when we when we made levels, we'd send them that diagnosis, they test them, and we get some feedback on it saying it's too hard, it's too easy, it took us this length of time to do. And there'd be a few notes for each level that we sent down. When we sent that one down, there was scribbles all over the page. Normally it'd take them about 3 to 5 minutes to finish a level. This one took them over an hour.
Wow.
Just scribbles everywhere. And it's just one of those levels that needs that slight lateral thinking to actually solve, that I was really quite proud of. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Again, I don't think I've got this in my questions, but what I like about the game is you can complete the same level in different ways, can't you?
Yeah.
And have you ever seen people play levels differently than you expected? And have you seen quite ingenious things go on?
In earlier levels, you can certainly do that. Later levels tend to be, you tend to have to do them in the specific way. When we were testing it, if somebody did it a different way, we'd go and change it to make sure it could get done in our way. The original, one of the things that Dave loved about Lemmings, and actually is what got him into all the GTA stuff as well, is this kind of just give them the tools and give them an open world and just let them figure it out. So the tools can just be used in any way. And it seems like it's very liberating and quite free to make them and use them, and you could do a level anyhow. But actually, like I say, early on when you had spares of skills, then you could probably do it slightly differently. But as soon as you got to the original design of that level, they were all pretty strict in terms of what you'd have to get and where you'd use things.
Yeah.
Because we spent a long time making sure that there was no other paths through. Because a lot of the time, when Steve Hammond was doing levels, a lot of his levels failed because there were these other paths. And he'd come up with this really difficult path through, but there'd be a really easy one to go round. And that was the trick. I mean, Dave only got a couple of levels in for the same reason. It was Scott, Dave, Gary, and I that kind of did the main bulk of the levels, because we were able to narrow down exactly the path that we wanted people to take.
No, good. I mean, I always thought, and you probably already answered it, that Lemmings could have a really good kind of map editor. You can make your own levels and challenge your friends. But I don't think that ever happened, did it? Is that fair?
No, I mean, there's obviously level editors out there now for it. Back then, the built-in level editor, there's actually a video of it up on my YouTube now. Okay. But back then we did consider releasing it, and the level editor that was built into the game was really nice to use. But Psygnosis just reckoned would make more money selling more levels rather than doing a level editor. And also, you couldn't really share levels very easily back then, so it'd be a bit pointless a lot of the time. So they just decided, no, we won't do a level editor, we'll just do more levels.
You had the Christmas editions and so forth, didn't you? And Oh No More Lemons. Yeah, I know, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've got to ask you, actually, Mike, about the infamous 666 level on Lemmings. I mean, that was one of yours, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
What? I mean, is that the hardest level in the game? I mean, can you explain exactly how did that come about exactly?
It's not very hard at all. It was just a visual concept more than anything else. In the level editor, you could set the release rates, the number of Lemmings you had, and all this kind of stuff, and it would give you a percentage at the end that you had to save and so on. And I was trying to make 55 of everything, but releasing 55, whatever it was, Lemmings, I couldn't get the 55% to quite match up. Yep. I just discovered by accident, if I made it 66, all the percentages and everything just worked out, so I could do 66 of everything. I happened to be designing the level because there was the different styles, and I just so happened I was in the Fire and Brimstone style, and you just think Fire and Brimstone 66, oh, 666. No, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, no, it wasn't. And that's the only reason it came about. And we got serious stick for it.
Oh, really?
The US kind of, deep south, they were not happy with the 666 in a game, saying promoting Satanism and all that kind of stuff. Although I do tend to think you dropped in it and you're rescuing them from it and taking them to a better place. That's my theory.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Was there any other kind of funny levels like that, or interesting sort of ideas that maybe didn't make it into the game? Any other kind of weird, level ideas, for example?
Not for me, really. I mean, the 666 one obviously got in, but was dropped from I think every other port of the game. like the Nintendo ones and stuff. They all dropped that and put in a substitute level. But all the other ones went over as is, and there was very little not taken. I've got one or two on my editor disk that didn't make the cut, but if they didn't make the cut, it's because they weren't particularly good,
right,
rather than there's just no space for it. We used all the levels that were good, basically.
Fair enough. How about abilities? I mean, obviously, some can sort of build bridges. There's umbrellas, obviously. There's diggers. I mean, there's so many very interesting abilities. Was there any for the original title? I mean, abilities that were discussed that never quite made it into the game?
No, I mean, when we saw it, I mean, it was mostly those skills that were in. I don't ever remember other ones really kind of coming and then going. It was always just the ones that were there. They kind of fill the gap pretty well. I think the only things that we thought were missing were some kind of vertical climbing thing. You've obviously got the builders that go diagonally, but you can have diggers that go straight down or miners that go diagonally. So there's no vertical build, but that was just part of the mechanic, just couldn't do that at the time. So the ones that were there were always the ones that were there. There was never any really added, and then we thought, no, we'll take them out. They just fit really well, I have to say. Dave Gary did a great job with those skills. They were perfect for it.
No, I agree. I think it's the perfect amount. How about I don't know if you know anything about this actually. Apparently there was an arcade version of Lemmings in the works.
Yeah.
But it was cancelled, and apparently there's a trackball. What exactly can you tell the story about that, Michael?
I don't know how it came about. I mean, it would have just been Psygnosis and Data East. I actually have an arcade board here with it. I rescued it from DMA when it died. You can actually play it on main. I managed to get the ROMs off it. I don't know if they exist anywhere else.
That's amazing.
So the Data East guy was apparently a huge Lemmings fan, and apparently whenever you had a meeting with him, he would challenge you to a 2-player Lemmings. So he was just huge fan of it. So they commissioned an arcade one. It got, I think that you can play the different levels. There was lots of bugs in it. But it was going to be trackball, because obviously you play it with a mouse rather than a joystick. So we did have one in the office, which is the board I've got. I didn't actually rescue the trackballs. But, it was there. It was buggy. Like I say, you can probably find it from AIM. Data East did it, and, it looked like Lemmings. It was also the thing that they gave us the idea for the fast forward, because they implemented the fast forward for Lemmings 1.
That's clever then, yeah.
Yeah, and we thought that's a good idea, so we pinched it for Lemmings 2. Because it was the thing that really annoys you in Lemmings 1, waiting for all your Lemmings to finish.
Yeah.
And fast forward, makes total sense. So we pinched that.
There you go. I mean, I bet those arcade machines are worth a pretty penny, if there's any knocking about still.
I don't think it was. They never got as far as an arcade machine.
Right.
It was
Okay.
Just a board.
Oh, fair enough. How about Lemmings 2 then? The Tribes. Were you involved in that game quite a lot as well?
I did the SNES version of it.
Right.
So, I mean, it was, again, Dave and Gary and some of the other artists and stuff, I guess, sat down and came up with a whole lot of skills. Obviously, coming from just that limited set, you wanted a whole load of new ones. So there was a few driving forces behind Lemmings 2. One is we wanted to get rid of the technology that was in Lemmings 1, which was just this huge bitmap. Because going on to console, it was a nightmare. You just didn't have the RAM for it. So Dave came up with a tile map system that he figured out would kind of work, and then sat with me and we kind of went through it and made sure it would. So I was obviously going to do it on the SNES, so I had to. And that was the kind of main driving force as far as the technology went, is to make sure it was actually portable into everything. But in doing so, you also got a chance to change the orientation of the levels. So Lemmings 1 was obviously just horizontal. Lemmings 2, there was several different sizes of map from horizontal to vertical.
Yeah.
And I think that was the best addition in Lemmings 2, was just that change in orientation, because it really changed how levels progressed and how you moved through them. It was totally different. The skills, again, like I say, was just, they came up with a load of skills, but some of them are rubbish. We ended up having to go back through levels and put in skills that were never used. So things like the roller and stuff were just pointless.
Yeah.
They were never used. So they put them into some levels just so they were used. Some of the other skills were very cool. Things like the Magna Booter was a really cool skill, but again, it was a pointless one. Things like the Ballooner were really nice and actually took a bit of skill to actually use, so they were really good ones. The Archer was a great skill, but the code was horrendous. And yeah, I mean, I would have taken maybe 10 or 20 skills, I think, rather than the huge numbers that we ended up with. You could have easily done a nice set of levels just with those ones. The tribes themselves, I think that was really the biggest problem with Lemmings, is that progression. People got stuck on a level, and that was just that, you got hit that frustration point. The tribes let you have basically 12 save points. So when you got frustrated with one, you could skip to another tribe and play that one. So it kept you in the game longer.
Yeah.
So that was just a really nice mechanism for keeping you non-frustrated, basically. So it was quite good fun. I mean, the SNES one, I said I did most of the SNES work. It was challenging, but it looks very pretty. Could play with a mouse. It was great. The SNES is a nice machine to work on. So.
God, I love the SNES. Is it true, actually, while I'm talking about the SNES, that I think it's the first Lemmings, or might be Lemmings 2, actually, you can use the Super Scope to shoot Lemmings, is that right?
Yeah, you plug the Super Scope into the second port, you could use the Super Scope to blow them up.
Is that the second Lemmings then, Lemmings 2?
The second Lemmings, yeah. Lemmings
Brilliant.
2.
Was that your idea to add that in? Just little.
Yeah, I borrowed the Super Scope from Russell Kay's company, just because I had a wacky idea for a hidden feature, and nobody ever found it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think I put it out on, who was it? The Armin Animation guys. They were doing a talk, and they asked me about it. So they did a video again. It's up on YouTube of them plugging in the Super Scope and playing Lemmings 2. Nobody ever found it, which surprised me, I have to say.
Yeah. I have to put you on the spot now, Mike. Is there any other sneaky Easter eggs you've added in any other games that you can reveal, or have you keeping your lips sealed?
No, I think that Shadow of the Beast had an Infinite Lives thing, but that was just on the buttons, and most people found it. It was really easy. I think you just did 1, 2, 2, 1 on the fire button, and you got Infinite Lives on the title screen.
Yeah.
Blood Money, you typed in "we missed" because we missed the deadline, and that gave you cheat mode, Infinite Lives on that one. What other games? I think that's it, really. It started a bit picky after that, so yeah.
Fair enough. Here's another bit of a wacky question, but if you could be like a master of any of the skills in any of the Lemmings games, you mentioned a few there for Lemmings 2, which skill would you love to have personally, and why?
You've got to go Super Lemming, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. That's the obvious answer.
Fly.
What would be the most pointless power, do you think?
Pointless power? Well, you get your roller and your runners and stuff. Yeah, roller was stupid.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got here that Lemmings was one of the most ported games of all time. It was on so many different systems and consoles and whatnot. And it's made, I've got here over 15 million sales. You may have a different figure, but would you personally class your work on Lemmings as probably your biggest achievement in the industry? I mean, not many people can say they worked on such an important game, in my personal opinion.
Most folk would probably class GTA as that, but I'm still a Lemmings boy.
Yeah.
I still favour Lemmings over GTA. I think it's got more potential for my liking. It's just never been taken. But I think the characters, the humour, I think it's a much more enjoyable game than GTA. So yeah.
We'll talk about GTA very soon. How about, again, as we're kind of the Lemmings theme, Lemmings 3, all new world of Lemmings. I mean, that's a bit of a different take on the game. What's your personal opinion on that game? Kind of the Lemmings 3 it's been sort of dubbed.
Yeah, I did a little bit on Lemmings 3. I did some of the audio stuff for them, and I did the installer, I seem to remember, as well. But it was really just rounding out the contract with Psygnosis. Psygnosis had contracted for 6 games, that was the last one. So it was really just a case of get another game done and get it out the door. Lemmings 3, the big characters really spoiled it for me.
Yeah.
That came about because they got contacted by the Children's Television Workshop, so Sesame Street, who were really interested in using Lemmings to count, because obviously there's a lot of them, and you could probably count them, and they like doing that. So they thought having Lemmings on screen walking past and counting them would be quite cool, but they needed them bigger for TV. So Dave decided, we'll do Lemmings 3, we'll make them bigger, then they could use it in the TV. So they came up with this mechanism for doing it, and then all this stuff fell through, and we're stuck with this game with big Lemmings. It didn't really work properly. You lost that instantaneousness of clicking and something happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem with Lemmings 3. Just big characters, they feel slow and sluggish because you click and then it's got to wait for an animation sequence before it. Yeah, it just didn't work properly. So I was never a big fan.
No, fair enough. How about the future of Lemmings? I mean, there's been some mobile games recently. Where would you like to see the series taken in the future, and would you ever love to get back on the Lemmings hot seat?
I mean, I've seen videos of the iPhone one, but I've never played it. It's got the same problem as Lemmings 3. They're all, you do stuff on a block and stuff, and I don't like that. I think it would be nice to see Lemmings just not regurgitating the same old gameplay, because that's all they're doing just now. It's the same game over and over again. The thing that I liked about Lemmings is the characters were so, versatile. You could use them in just about anything. I think the tribes probably showed that more than anything else. It's just, you could dress them up, you could do anything with them. And I would have liked to seen a lot more, like, different game types just using the Lemmings. Do a platformer, do funny shooters. I know Russell's company did Lemmings Paintball, and more of that, just different directions with the characters, like Mario's done, I think is what they need to do. But they've just, same game. And it's just boring.
How about let's go to GTA now, if that's all right, Michael. I mean, again, that's an unbelievable game. I guess I'm assuming you would never think that the game then, when you're working on, would become the sort of juggernaut it is now. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, isn't it? It really is. But when you were first making GTA, sorry, I think it was called Race and Chase. Is it true that it was originally sort of developed for the Amiga?
No.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, it was never even considered for the Amiga. So GTA came about, let's see, so it would have been 94. I'd finished my SNES work. So I'd finished doing Lemmings 2, and I'd just finished doing Uniracer stuff as well. And I was kind of left to my own devices to play with stuff. So I was playing with some technology ideas. I'd never done an isometric game, so I decided to basically see how we do an isometric game on a PC. That was my current platform. So I built this basic isometric thing, standard isometric. You build a level, you walk through it. I thought, okay, that's very good, but everybody's obviously done that. So what can you do to make it a bit more interesting? So I decided to basically see if I could spin the isometric view smoothly, rather than just that forced 90-degree thing. So managed to get that working, and basically had this kind of little mini city view, spinning about in an isometric view, which was quite interesting. So I showed Dave, and he thought, you could probably use it for some kind of game engine. So he gave it to Keith, who just finished Lemmings 3. He was the guy that led the Lemmings 3 team.
Yeah.
And him and what's his name? Graham Watson? No, I can't remember the guy's name now. Somebody Watson. The designer guy. He came up with basically a game design that was about gangs fighting each other using this engine. And it's actually really what what GTA 2 kind of turned into, funnily enough. But for this one, they set out trying to rebuild this engine, but they're trying to do it in high res. Keith wasn't especially good at assembler, so it was all in C, so it was just sluggish, and they just couldn't quite get it working at the pace they needed it to. But while they were doing that, I'd carried on with my kind of tech ideas, and I'd seen Clockwork Knight on the Sega Saturn, because we had a Saturn machine in the office.
Yeah.
I was sitting watching it, and I loved this kind of parallax platform, perspective platform that they had. So I thought, well, could I do that on the PC? So I managed to reproduce that perspective, platform that he jumps on, and then realized that, what if I took the GTA, that isometric thing, which was basically just a big stack of points in this kind of cube world that is spun. What if I did that and actually put perspective on it, so that, it could be side on, and you could have all these platforms moving in this kind of perspective cube world.
Yes.
I got that up and running, and then showed John White, who was they were starting to work on the N64 stuff, and he'd said that they'd been trying to get a racing game past Dave for ages, but he just wasn't particularly interested. Dave's a big car nut, but just racing games are always the same thing. This promised to be a little bit different from normal racing games. Racing games in general was that first-person view, kind of, driving a car in a third-person thing, whatever. So I suddenly realized if I put a wall in this side-on platformer that I had, but actually painted roads on it, then all of a sudden it goes from the side-on thing to top-down just by putting roads on the wall.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you've got this little mini kind of top-down city that you can kind of scroll about, and you get this lovely perspective out of it. So this was late 94 that I was doing this. This would have been still on a 486 at this point. So I showed Dave. So Dave was there with a guy, David Osborne, who was one of the head artists. Keith was there. And we kind of showed them what I could do and how it worked. And if you remember back, I was saying that Dave likes this idea of a sandbox, like Lemmings. You give them tools and a world to play in, and just let them go at it and put things in it. And you kind of realize pretty quickly that given a city that you've got decent kind of constraints around, so you can make it appear quite busy, that you can make, this kind of living city, and then you could just drop players into it and let them, do things. And so he decided, okay, we'll scrap the other one, which turned out to be a good idea, because about a year later, Syndicate Wars came out, and we didn't like the viewpoint at all, and that was more or less that isometric rotating thing. So we were quite pleased we dropped that. But Keith took the engine, redid it on C, and then they started to do this game that David thought of, which is this cops and robbers. So you could play either the cops or the robbers. Excuse me. And the idea being that if you're the cops, you would chase after the robbers. If you're the robbers, you avoid the cops and commit crimes and so on. So it took a while for them to kind of get things going, particularly because they couldn't get the car physics right for a long time. And then Pat Kerr, who was working on a game called Wild Metal Country, he basically just went, look, here's the car physics we did. And they kind of dropped this one in. It was just very nice to use. And at that point, they got this kind of driving through the streets of this big city. There's nothing else there. There was just this one car driving through. There was corruption all over the place, but you got this feel of speed and a car going through the city. And it's kind of that point you go, yeah, this feels nice. This could be quite cool. And then they start to put the city into life and just, add pedestrians, add more cars, and all this kind of stuff. GTA has always been kind of slated for its very basic retro graphics, which in some regards true, but at the same time, the game would never have worked in a third person or first person viewpoint, particularly back then.
Yeah.
You think you're starting the game in 95, 96 is when it's supposed to be finished. You'd still be software rendering, really. You couldn't have drawn a city with any kind of view distance in third person and have populated it at the same time. You look back at games like Carmageddon and stuff that have, were about that time.
Yeah.
They've got like two people walking about and another car. There's nothing there. Whereas GTA, because of that top-down view, and sprites, it's busy. There's lots moving
Oh, yeah.
about. And that's what really makes the game. And most people tend to miss that, is that it's the fact that it's a living city is why you have so much fun in there. And if it had been in 3D, it would never have been like that. So I think the whole thing about, giving this top-down view where you could zoom out and you see more of the city, the engine just kind of lended itself to that. And it let you confine it to just that view to be able to fill it with interesting things. You can put in lots of pedestrians, you could put other cars in it, you could put police, ambulance, all the trains and stuff, and they were very easily culled out without having to try and draw huge amounts all the time. So it kind of progressed, as most games do. It went through lots of design issues, most of which I'm not particularly privy to because I was doing tech on it. I took over the rendering of it from Keith. I ended up giving them this little library that would release now and again with a new rendering engine. I rewrote all the stuff in assembler. And then we were ready to get a visit from 3D Effects, and we suddenly realized we had nothing to show them. They'd given us a card about a year or so earlier, but we didn't actually have any 3D games at that point. So it was a case of, well, what do we show them? Because I've been doing this library, I managed to knock up a version of the GTA library with the 3D effects in it, which meant we could have a nice high-res filtered thing, which was really nice. So we kind of showed them that and went, we're using the cards. Thank you for sending us free stuff. And it was all very good, but it played so well, and you got such a smooth frame rate and everything that we couldn't bring it about to throw it away. It was just done as a hacky test, but it was too good to throw away, so we ended up having to maintain it and then releasing it. But it was never paid for by anybody. It was just a demo that was too good to bin.
I've heard reports that it was close to being cancelled at some point. Is that true, or is it? You said you just couldn't cancel it. Is that right? Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Mike?
Sorry, you probably broke up there.
Oh yeah, sorry. We'll cut that bit out. Yeah, Mike, I just want to ask if it was ever close to being cancelled, or is it always going to be made?
I think that the people in the production part, so because I was on the tech, you obviously had the producers and stuff that were talking to BMG, and they kept saying that they wanted to cut it all the time. They had to fight for it, almost every week to stop it from being cut. I was never in those meetings, but you talk to like Gary, Penn, or Dave, and they were going, yeah, every other week they were talking about cancelling it. So it did have a rocky birth, to say the least.
When it was released, it caused quite a bit of controversy, didn't it, in the media? And I've heard even reports here. Again, you can say this is a load of rubbish, but I've got here some reports that the infamous publicist Matt Clifford actually planted a few stories about the game that could either maybe help sell the game or bring it to the media attention. What do you think about that? And what are your views about the controversy about the game?
Well, David always said that he had a meeting with Max Clifford and he laid out this PR campaign and told them all the different things were going to happen, all this controversy and stuff, and that every single one happened. So, I mean, Max was obviously this media guru and what he was doing. So you can only assume that, there was things planted to cause controversy. I mean, how else would you get a game like that being discussed in the House of Lords? It's crazy.
It's mad,
they're talking about murder simulators. There was nothing like that. There's much worse games going about. So it was. I put all the media success right down to Max Clifford. He knew what he was doing, and he did it well.
No, yeah, fair enough. Were you surprised, actually? I mean, look, let's be honest. The first Grand Theft Auto was not no dud. It sold millions, didn't it? But are you even shocked today how massive the series has become? Arguably the biggest game series in the world right now.
Yeah, I mean, PS2 had a lot to say about that, really. I think the guys from Silicon Valley that did the game Silicon Valley at DMA, Les Benzies and Adam and stuff, and Ober, they were the ones that really took it from basically what's an arcade game. You look at GTA 1 and GTA 2, they're
Yeah.
still fundamentally arcade games, because that's what DMA kind of did. And they're the ones that took it from that into this kind of cinema style storytelling. And I think that's what took it to the mass market, coupled with the PS2 becoming that kind of really cool must-have thing. I think the two kind of needed each other to really make the success out of it. So GTA became the game you had to have on a PS2, but everybody had to have a PS2 because it was just this cool, desirable thing. So one made the other, I suspect.
Yeah.
And then once they were starting to play it, GTA 3, Vice City, and so on, and it just got bigger and bigger. And from that, it was just obviously it was just going to take off. I don't think you could ever have guessed it was going to be as big as it is, but certainly back in early 2000 or something, after GTA 2 and Vice City, you could kind of see it's starting to grow its momentum.
Yeah.
But I put that again down to Les and the guys that just took it in a totally different direction from the original game. The original core game's still there because that's what's still fun, stealing cars and going about and stuff. That's still the core mechanic. But taking it away from that fundamental arcade experience and making it that 3D story film thing is really what kind of attracted the masses, I think. And again, you look at the early PS2 version of GTA 3, and there's still not a lot walking about. They were definitely kind of cutting the edge in terms of making a living city at that point. It was, it was hit or miss whether people would fall for it, really, because there wasn't a lot of going on at that point.
Yeah.
But I think, once folk kind of, okay, we'll forgive that, then it just kind of took off with the kind of storyline stuff.
No, fair enough. And obviously, DMA Design, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, it turned into Rockstar North. Is that right? And were you there at the time, or when did you leave
the
company?
I left just before GTA 2 finished. I'd done the graphic engine for GTA 2, and I left to go and be head of R&D at Russell Kay's Visual Sciences company. So I kind of saw it from afar, really. But I know that the guys in Dundee were treated badly by Rockstar.
Really?
As they moved everybody to Edinburgh.
Right, that's a shame. Obviously, Rockstar North is still a massive Scottish video, but it does sound not quite the same. Some people say it's like the DMA Design of the future, but you wouldn't quite agree, would you? It's not really.
No, it's very big and corporate. So.
Very big corporate. I mean, GTA is one of the biggest exports from Scotland, apparently. That's incredible, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
When you see the new games, do you see it as a completely new entity, or do you still you must still feel proud that you're part of the original?
I mean, it's still an evolution of the original games. Like I say, the core mechanic of what it all does is still in there, and that still drives the whole game. So, it's like any of these kind of big franchises. You look at the original Mario from Donkey Kong. It's it's started from that and gone on. But when you have a hand in the original, you still feel quite proud of it. No,
of course you should. Are you looking forward to the new GTA 6? I mean, there's rumblings it's being produced, and which direction do you think they should go in? Do you think it's just going to keep going the way it is, or are you a fan of the current sort of series?
I haven't played GTA 5 at all. I did get 4 just to run about and then see what the engine was like. But most of the games, I mean, GTA 3 and 4, like I said, I don't know about 5, but I hate this kind of blocking off of content where you just want to drive about, because that's the fun bit. In Vice City, all I did was steal a car, drive about, steal a fire engine, do a lot of missions. I have no interest in these big long stories. I just don't have the time for it.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the newer games. They're just kind of they're kind of for younger generations that have the time to waste.
I actually, when I was playing GTA growing up, I'll be honest, Mike, I didn't do the missions. I just like to drive around and get the police after me, and I never really did the missions. But that was part of the fun, and I didn't feel guilty about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying about being an arcade game. It's just that immediate kind of fun of get in, do this, cause mayhem, and then if you died, okay, that will start again. You didn't really care that much. And that's the core mechanic of it, and that's still
Yeah.
kind of there. But the later games kind of block it off a little bit.
Yeah.
I think GTA 3 is a bit more, GTA 5 is more open. It's just this kind of bigger open world rather than, GTA 4, they had whole cities blocked off, like, barriers and stuff, and that was just horrible.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's certainly more open now. So to some respect, it's kind of getting back to its original route, to just letting people play. My son plays it. They go and have mad fun and doing stunts and stuff all over the place. Again, they don't play the missions; they play about in it.
Yeah.
And which is what the original game was.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Got a few sort of random last few questions. I know you're a busy man, Michael, but if you could work on any sort of sequel to any DMA Design title, ones you've worked on, ones you've sort of only had a few things involved in, what would you love to do? Any particular title you'd love to make a sequel in?
I'd love to do another Blood Money, I have to say. Blood Money.
Oh, yes.
Shooter on Amiga. That was great fun. Always thought a 3D side-on one of that would be lovely. Uniracers is, again, it's one of these games that, because of the Pixar lawsuit, you just can't do. But it was a fun game. No, probably Blood Money, I have to say. Blood Money was good fun.
Yeah, good answer. How about a Walker? I mean, I don't know if you heard, but Mike Clark was actually working on a PS3 Walker game. Do you reckon there's room for a new Walker game?
Anything where you shoot masses of little people, that's fine.
Yeah. Did you ever start working on any video games that were never completed, never released? And if so, which of those titles do you think would have actually been quite successful?
Loads.
Oh, really?
In games, you start lots of stuff that is never finished. There's a few of them that I hope to resurrect at some point, so we'll keep quiet about those. There's certainly some, even when we're growing up before The Office, that I'd still quite like to go back and try and play with at some point, because there was some good ideas in there. So there was a good few. I think Gore could still be quite good. That was basically a Golden Axe style thing with huge characters.
Yeah.
I think that could be good. It's kind of missing genre these days. That kind of wandering through, just hacking things.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of died to death, but they were always good fun. So there's good few. Maybe I'll get round to doing that at some point.
Good stuff. What are your 3 favourite games of all time? A really tough question.
Super Mario World, the one that came with the SNES. I spent a year playing that constantly till I finished it and got 100% on it.
Wow.
The Monkey Island series.
Oh, yes. Personal favourite.
Because they're just phenomenally good. Then it gets tougher. You'd probably be the more modern ones. I suspect the earlier Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed 2 is probably my favourite.
Right.
The early Call of Duty ones were good too, but the Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 1 was the prettier one, but Assassin's Creed 2 had better game mechanics in it for combat. It was just much easier. So probably Assassin's Creed 2. Yeah, I suspect so. So those 3.
Yeah, good choices. Are you still actually in the gaming industry then? And if so, what projects are you currently working on, or is it all quite hush-hush?
Yeah, I've got my own little company now that I'm just me on my own, just doing little indie-style games. I have an IP I'm working on that I can't say anything about at the moment. Probably won't be too long until it's out. But it's, just trying to do something that's a bit more educational, but not educational games, more games that are educational, because educational games are shit. So we want to do something that basically feels like a game that you happen to be learning in without you knowing. I think that would be nice to try and achieve.
Yeah.
I think kids spend so much time in games. If you could just turn the tables on them a little bit and get them to learn something when they're in there, that would be nice.
I like it. I like it. It's been a great chat, Mike. I've really enjoyed owning to you today. I've got one sort of final sort of wacky question. If you could go for a few drinks with any video game character in the world of any video game, who would you choose and why?
Yeah, it's a tough one, that. It would probably either be the Leisure Suit Larry guy, because he'd have some hell of a story.
Yes, he would.
Or the Blue Shift security guy because he desperately needs a drink. One of those.
They both need drinks for different reasons. Yeah. Oh, Michael, thank you so much. It's been a great chat, and yeah, I really appreciate your time today.
No worries. It's been fun.